I
So
can.
I'm hoping that you can see the screen now.
Yes. Yep, we can. Thank you.
Great. Okay, brilliant. My internet connection's a little bit dodgy, and it's been playing up all week. So I've also tried to put. Hopefully, you can see there's the captions that are on there in case my audio goes a bit funny as well. Although it doesn't like my Yorkshire accent, so it's a common problem with caption systems. To kind of introduce myself, I'm an associate professor in enterprise and innovation. I've been at Napier now for around about 14, 15 months. Um, I essentially, I'm a second time round academic. And what I mean by that is very simple, that my background's a little bit weird and strange in the fact that I spend quite a lot of time juggling between the academic and the commercial worlds. I've been an entrepreneur. I've done spin outs from my own research, as well as I've been an academic. I've been a head of learning and teaching at one point. And I've recently come back into the academic system with a particular interest in terms of entrepreneurship, but also sustainability, digital skills, and developing more entrepreneurial thinking amongst the students. And I've done quite a lot of stuff previously, taking the really boring stuff of research methods and then trying to make it relevant for people with things like videos. One of the spin outs I had was derived from some work where I was developing a multimedia case study system that we used to teach consultancy skills. And then I've almost had a little bit of a previous go at some of this, where at one point I tried to get rid of lectures and use much more screencasts in my practice. And then these days I spend quite a lot of time working between digital skills, but also other areas like use of creative serious play, things like Lego, to help support students. And one of the things I particularly am interested in is connecting those skills that we teach students into real world entrepreneurship and also into their employability skills. So to give you a quick background to some of that, very quick. The future economic trends that we're expecting are probably the ones that you would normally see. A bit of ideas about climate change, resource scarcity, increase to digital, and that's actually had an influence on partly my practice and what I'm teaching students, because what we're seeing is a lot use of a lot more platforms. So the Amazons of this world are likely to be the way that we see a lot of business work in the future. And that's important because we need to reflect that in our learning and teaching. Secondly, the way that people are actually going to be looking at our graduates are going to be changing, and PwC is suggesting that the skills and knowledge that we embed is going to be much more important than the university degree. And they're actually now thinking about looking beyond university to get their employees in from that. The other thing is that the traditional job, we've been saying this for a while, is going to start disappearing. It's estimated that by 2030, only 9% of people will be in a permanent job. And so this idea about emergent entrepreneurship, self-employment, portfolio career is going to become much more important. And at this point, I would normally just launch straight into what else we're doing in terms of thinking about entrepreneurship and how we use that in terms of the pedagogy. Obviously, we've had a little bit of a sort of breach in practice, and COVID seems to be bringing some of these key issues to the front very quickly. So the precariousness of employment is becoming really important. And when I'm talking to my students, a lot of them, they've been were going into graduate jobs, and those graduate jobs have now disappeared. That the businesses are not taking them forward, so they're back into the employment search. We're seeing the way that people are actually working is changing very quickly. We've got a very forced evolution in the way that people are actually using their technical skills. So things like the ability to use Zoom, the ability to actually present online, has gone from a very nice to have to actually becoming really important. And we're also seeing that there's an acceleration on these platforms. So I'm sure many of us have bought far too much on Amazon while we've been sat at home. And we've been using a lot of these platforms like Zoom and Teams. These are becoming much more important to the way that we're going to have to start thinking about issues of learning and teaching, and not because we're a big fan of those, but because we need to start making the students aware. And it's, for me, coming from an entrepreneurial background, this is a great period of transition, but it's also a great opportunity to reflect on what we do in our practice, and let's see what we do well and what we don't do so well as well. So my key ethos has been very much about connecting the academic world and the commercial world. So what I've been doing is taking some of the materials and ideas that I've used with small business incubators and accelerators and starting to move those into my teaching. And the flip side of that is I need to assess that in terms of its pedagogy and how well it works with students. So one of the things I did was I started on the Napier's MSc in Blended and Online Education, and I'm just coming to the end of that first year. Secondly, as well, I'm very much interested in moving from very much a theory-based approach to something that is much more about societal needs. And going back to things like Shearer's work, I'm very much about transitioning from this sense that theory is the only way that we can do things and models are the only way that we can do things, to actually a lot of the skills-based approaches are becoming much more important. And also what I want to do is encourage students to experiment, and taking some basic principles of fail fast, try and do that in a very low resource expense, and to learn quickly. And I think that's a really important is we need to learn quickly at new ways of doing things, but also be able to work out when failures are appearing. And the other thing that I don't always successfully do is I come from complex systems background, really, and what tends to work better are very simple principles that you build up, seem to create survival, and also, perhaps more importantly, they're really useful for when we're growing businesses in the real world, because it allows us to create much more modular ways of learning about how our business works. So we try and encourage, even within our entrepreneurial students, a very reflective approach. And so what I've been doing is applying this across a few different sets of areas, and particularly I've been picking up entrepreneurial consulting and business growth issues as a couple of exemplars of practice. And for this, what I've been doing is trying and experimenting with new areas. And the idea behind this is to give students those skills more directly. What is particularly important about this is I've been taking an approach which pushes different sets of modes. And what you can probably see here is the kind of learning style model. I'm not necessarily a big fan of learning styles, but it's an ability to actually use different areas. So using kinesthetic ideas, Lego games, we were talking about polo wound management earlier on. So that's a good example of that. And what I'm particularly trying to do is balance those in terms of the skills and practice that I've been doing, partly because the entrepreneurship community has a large number of people who have dyslexia. And it's a common practice that we're actually seeing. So what I've been trying to do with the students, and I've been doing this quite a lot with particularly students in WebEx, is getting them to go back to some basic principles of do, check, learn. And I think it's a really important factor when we're doing our practice at the moment, is what can we do, what can we change? How can we actually think about building something, testing it out, and then seeing whether it works, so that we fail fast, and also from that perhaps more importantly, it means that we're not putting a lot of expense into it. And I've been listening outside of here to conversations about, should we have large platforms, should we be spending lots of money? Actually, let's see if we can get our practice right. And this resonates with the students because it relates back to what we do in reality with them in terms of entrepreneurship, which is that's basically what we do over and over again. And then what we do is connect it into some key areas for project management, of making sure that there's a clear amount of information for them, but the ability to then prioritize their tasks. So what have I been doing? Well, one of the most important factors that's come out of the MSc is that I started doing quite a lot of embedding of digital skills, and particularly use of digital video, technology mediated virtual teams. We've been using infographics as well, but that's probably outside of this. But also starting to think about these ideas about AI analytics and automation platforms, because that's a way that real businesses are scaling. And what I've been therefore doing has been quite relevant in this situation. So we were originally looking at giving students 3 attempts to do their assessment, or 3 ways to do their presentation assessment, which was through oral presentation, through face-to-face, narrated PowerPoint, or video. And as part of that, I've actually created some basic support videos for them how to do this. And so we're working through this process. The YouTube links there, you feel free to use them. These are the first stage ones. What we then found was that COVID came in. So narrated PowerPoint became a major issue, and for not just my module, we moved all of our assessment to narrated PowerPoint only, but this was increasingly picked up, and the videos were picked up by colleagues in the business school, and they've been used on I think it's about 8 or 9 different modules now to help support students. These videos are not the best. I've gone through and had different stages of developing those. What was crucial, though, is that the student feedback that we've had has been excellent, that they've really loved using the narrated PowerPoint. It's something most of them haven't done before, and it's also something that they found really different from their existing practice, and they're finding very quickly that they're using it. They're now getting asked directly by employers to do narrated PowerPoints, because that's how they're actually getting their employment. In my investor mode, most of the initial pitches that come through for investment are now coming through as videos, and they're short 5-10 minute videos. So that's worked quite well. What we started to do now is start using some more of the digital platforms to help. And one of the things I've been doing with a stage 2 support is using Microsoft Stream for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're trying to use more of the Microsoft products as a platform to teach ideas rather than just teaching Microsoft. But the other reason is because we can link it more directly into the practice. So as part of this, by uploading video, it will automatically create a transcript which gets around a lot of accessibility issues. But the other factor is it allows us to start connecting different areas together. And by clicking on the interactivity, we can add videos, other videos, quizzes, polls, which we can use to support learning. That's what I'm experimenting with at the moment, particularly. But that's particularly important because we can use that data to then work with the students to teach them the basics of automation, AI, not because they need to know everything, but because they need to get a sense of how this would work in a small business, or indeed if they're going to go work for the likes of PwC, etc. And out of that, because of the current situation, we're already looking at how we can flip platforms or flip the classroom to use the digital platform to aid those digital skills. So the entrepreneurial consulting module teaches basic project management, entrepreneurial consulting skills. But what we're now going to be doing is using that as a platform to develop their wider capabilities and use that as a flip so that the students themselves will be posting up more directly. What do I need for this particular project? How do I get access to that area? And the teaching I'm doing tomorrow is on one of the growth modules. What we've done is we're sticking with the VLE. We use Moodle. But what we're actually starting to do is flip that around so that for the day-to-day interaction, we're looking at Microsoft Teams, and you can see here, there's a link directly into that area. The idea being that the students will go through the units on the left. There'll be some short videos, there's reading, and then they go direct in, and then we actually discuss it. And that's going to be across about 3 hours. The other factor as part of this is that it changes the nature of the teaching presence. So if we go back to the kind of Garrison Anderson model, what we're trying to do is keep the students in the loop and actually talk to them about how we're changing this. And one of the questions I asked them was, do you want to go to purely online so that you don't see me? And the response that came back was, no, we want your presence in this situation. We want to be able to talk to you about it. And then this is basically what we're doing. So what I've got set up for tomorrow, I would have shown you the direct Teams itself, but it doesn't want to play very well with Zoom, is that we are using a general room with traditional video where we can have a wider set of conversations. But we're also using breakout rooms where the students can move into this. And I found that you can run two Teams videos, at the same time. So you can move in and out of these breakout rooms and see how the students are doing. And as part of that, the other benefit is that because we have the main conversation links, we can go back and we can look at what other people have been saying, and it captures the information for the students. And the other way that we're started doing that is by using the class notebook function, which is OneNote. So I've wiped out some of the student names on this, but you can see here that so for myself, I've put some miscellaneous notebook, something about the growth case where students can write themselves, something about their own project, and then some wider class notes. But we also have a collaboration space that we're testing, which is on our main case study that we're using for teaching. So the idea is that they can collaborate. Don't know how that's working. We've tested it in a couple of different areas and it seems to work okay. We'll see how that works, particularly tomorrow. And then coming next is we're going to be connecting all this through to some of those functions that are on the platform, because we need to teach these for the students, because it's exactly what they're going to be facing as soon as they get it into the outside world. So we're looking at how we can use Microsoft Stream and Dynamics to show them how some of the basic analytics works, and same with Power BI, but also as well automation. And I've started using automation for a little bit of student support, not while successfully. Flow has a tendency of breaking, I'm finding. But the idea is that we learn how to use it and then we can teach the students how to use it. And as I learn it, I'm actually then passing information to some of my colleagues so that they're really learning about it as well. Some reflections on where we are. Actually, the students are really supportive of new innovations. But they need a lot more support on digital skills than I'd actually recognised. And what we're already seeing from the outside world is those digital skills in the curriculum, the expectation are actually ramping up. Information I'm getting from my venture capital friends are this is going to be a make or break very quickly within the next six to 8 months. And also connecting more through to colleagues. So I've been learning things. I've now been passing that on to some other colleagues. The practice I think we need to start doing from here is building these learning communities amongst ourselves, these communities of practice, to be able to actually do that. And I think COVID's actually created a really good opportunity to play with these platforms. But my concern is that those platforms still have a number of issues. AI is very biased in particular areas. There are a number of issues about how do we access it, and I think that's something we still need to work with. The students need to know about it, but also get them to critically reflect on how those platforms may be a problem. The question I keep getting asked, does this replace the VLE? No. Putting it bluntly, not yet. I think we're a long way away from it. And the students are actually still asking about VLE related materials. And anecdotally, this is already helping students. I've had a couple of students who've come back to me and said, oh, out of doing that, I've actually managed to get myself a job. Or out of that, I've managed to pitch something to one of the investment groups, and we've got some funding. So that's kind of what I've been doing. That's quite a quick trip through, and I picked up a number of kind of different areas. Are there particular things that jumped out at people? And some questions for you. Is this something that you're kind of seeing in your practice? Are there particular things out of that you want me to explain more, that you would like to take away?
Let's open the mic. Anybody got any questions or comments or feedback for Chris? Because I know he's open to all.
I am.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Sorry, I can't see a hand, so is it okay? I don't know. Did someone else come in?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, got the mic.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's a really good point about how our curricula are adapting to the new normal in the content as well. So, in the medical school, we're already thinking about, well, patient consultations are now happening online. So having to put the, and actually in a way that's easier for us to do at the moment than to get them into a surgery. I mean, for sure, there's the ethical considerations with patients, but it's making us feel being really reactive. I like also your openness with the students. I think this is so important. Students know, they've realised there's been a pandemic. They're not stupid. and I think we just have to be confident in ourselves that we can be open with our students. And
I've got to admit, I've used it as a learning point, particularly with the students, saying, look, we're experimenting with this. When we actually talk about lean entrepreneurship, and we talk about, there's different variations, and I say, look, this is how we're working through it, and we're trying to get feedback from you. And they find it actually really reassuring that we're actually, we're
and also, we can bring our teaching in there as well. So for me, it's education, and I can talk through to them and saying, well, these are the learning outcomes we're aiming at. This is what we were doing before. This is how we're adapting it now. You're using it for preparing them for how they're now going to be interacting with businesses. So I've just made a note to myself, because at the moment I faculty development module that I lead, we do actually get them to do an elevator pitch. Well, they're unlikely to be in an elevator with their dean in the near future. So I'm just going to put an alternative in there for a narrative PowerPoint. Excellent, thank you for that. I've written that down. Thank you.
I will share the updated stage to support mechanisms, because one of the complaints was they were really long, so I've cut it down, and I've cut it down again. So those are going up, and what I've actually found useful is using the Microsoft Stream creates that set of captions for me, and then I can use that when I upload a closed captions to YouTube. So it's actually making my life easier for once.
Yeah. And role modeling closed captions for us now. Thank you.
Yeah, well done on that. Yeah. Yes. One way to try and defeat bandwidth or whatever else it is that's going on